Hi, Stephen from Infinity Science Center, and today we're going to take a brief look at the Apollo 13 mission. So, like a certain 1960s TV show, just sit right back as I tell the tale of a fateful trip. Apollo 13 was supposed to be America's third landing on the moon. Here's a picture of the prime crew. Wait, who's this guy? That's Thomas Ken Mattingly, command module pilot, and I know exactly what all of you are thinking. Well, didn't Jack Swigert fly on this mission? You are completely correct. Here's what happened. So Ken Mattingly was exposed to German measles around a week before the launch. And well, guess who didn't have any immunity to that disease? Yeah, it was Ken Mattingly. Anyway, so instead of scrubbing the mission or swapping the prime crew for the backup crew, they simply swapped Mattingly for Swigert around 72 hours before the launch. So this is the crew photo of Apollo 13 that many of us are familiar with because, well, this is the crew that flew the mission. The mission launched on April 11th, 1970 at 1:13 p.m. And, in military time, that's 13:13 p.m. Well, I guess they weren't feeling particularly superstitious. About 5.5 minutes into the flight, the center engine on the second stage shut down. Now, that stage had to fire for 34 extra seconds, and the third stage fired for an extra 9 seconds to get the spacecraft to orbit. Since no mission up to that point had gone off completely without a hitch, the crew and mission control had figured that was going to be their only glitch for this mission. Well, they ended up being wrong, but they wouldn't find out for over 2 days. Speaking of those first 2 days, well, everything on the mission was going pretty smoothly. I mean, it was going so smoothly that there wasn't a whole lot of interest in the mission. And if you think about it, that's kind of foreshadowed the way that we look at spaceflight as pretty routine today. Commander Jim Lovell and lunar module pilot Fred Haines had just completed a television broadcast that was not carried by any of the three TV networks when the explosion occurred. What happened? Well, Mission Control asked Swigert to stir the cryogenic tanks, and they had to do that in order to make sure that the liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen were evenly distributed inside the tanks. Due to some exposed wires, a fire started in oxygen tank number 2, and the tank exploded from a buildup of pressure. The explosion caused a leak in oxygen tank number 1, and if you'd like to know more about why the tank exploded, check out the video in the description. Let's just say, oops doesn't begin to cover it. And here we come to the famous line, Houston, we have a problem. Except no one actually said it that way. Jack Swigert and later Jim Lovell said, Houston, we've had a problem. Anyway, without oxygen tank number 2 and the leak in tank number 1, there wasn't going to be enough oxygen for the crew to breathe and for the fuel cells to operate correctly. So at that point in the mission, it changed from lunar landing to direct return to Earth. There was just one problem. The command module was dying. You see, without the fuel cells, it was starting to work on batteries alone, and they were actually going to need those batteries later for re-entry. If you had seen the 1995 movie, you would think that they came up with the idea of using the lunar module as a lifeboat kind of on the fly, but it was already a contingency plan. There were problems with this plan, though. The lunar module was designed to sustain 2 astronauts for around 45 hours. Aquarius, the lunar module on this mission, would have to sustain 3 astronauts for around 90 hours. As a result of this, water, oxygen, and power were a concern, as well as carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide buildup is extremely dangerous, so NASA had already planned for that when they designed the Apollo hardware. There were lithium hydroxide canisters in both the command module and the lunar module to scrub that carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere of the spacecraft, which was all well and good, except that, well, both modules had a different shape for their lithium hydroxide canister. The command modules were square, where the lunar modules were round. So basically, NASA had to figure out how to fit a square peg into a round hole. And guess what? They did it. They came up with a way to use the command module's canisters with the lunar module. And here's what the results of that engineering look like. Houston instructed the crew to turn off all non-essential systems in the lunar module to preserve power and water. To preserve water, the crew was limited to just 6 ounces per day. This caused them to become dehydrated, and Fred Haines developed a UTI as well. As the spacecraft rounded the backside of the moon, Swigert and Haines were taking pictures, kind of like tourists. This was their only trip in space. Lovell had already been in space a few other times and had been around the moon on the Apollo 8 mission. After going around the moon, there was a burn of the lunar module's descent engine that lasted about 4.5 minutes to speed up the return so that the crew wouldn't run out of consumables. A previous burn on the way to the moon placed the ship back onto a free return trajectory to Earth. On April 17th, 1970, the service module was jettisoned prior to reentry, and this picture taken by the crew shows the extent of the damage to the service module. There was one more burn before reentry to fix the entry angle for the command module. The entry angle has to be, well, just right, or the spacecraft would, well, skip off the atmosphere or, become a meteor. And, well, neither of those things are an option for NASA. So around this time, the crew had to restart the command module, which had never actually been done before during a mission. They'd only done it in simulators before. The re-entry batteries were charged using the power system of the lunar module, and shortly before re-entry, Aquarius was jettisoned. Communications blackouts are a normal part of spaceflight and are estimated to last a certain amount of time. These are caused by the ionizations of the gases around the command module as it moves through the Earth's atmosphere. Mission Control had estimated a 3-minute blackout for Apollo 13, but it actually lasted for closer to 6 minutes due to a slight variation in the descent angle. Apollo 13 splashed down at 1:07 p.m. Eastern Time on April 17, 1970, and despite all the problems, this was actually the second most accurate splashdown to that date. The Apollo 13 mission has been dubbed a successful failure. Let me explain. So, they didn't get to land on the moon. That was a failure. But more importantly, the crew made it back alive, and that was a success. President Nixon even mentioned it during his speech at the time. It's also been called NASA's finest hour. Thanks for joining me for this look back at the Apollo 13 mission on its 55th anniversary. We're open Thursday through Sunday, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m., and you can view our calendar events on our website. If you'd like to know more about the Apollo program, just let us know down in the comments, and I'll see you next time.